Welcome into another episode of Mac and Mose. Andy McNamara, joined by GoDucks.com editor-in-chief Rob Moseley, and we are here to recap Oregon's 62-38 victory against Washington State. We talked about it a little bit last week, Rob. Washington State, for whatever reason, weird things happen when these two teams get together. Oregon just rolls out to this big 27-7 lead in the first quarter. Things look like, this is just going to be an absolute thrashing. Final score was pretty dominant, but Washington State comes within, I think they got within 27-24, and then it was only a 10-point lead at halftime.
Yeah, weird things happened to the extent that Marcus Mariota committed a turnover. For the first time since, the Stanford game last year? I don't know if he'd fumbled between now and then. He still doesn't have an interception since then, but loses not one but two fumbles. One gets returned. We've got a hashtag fat guy touchdown, which everybody loves, and gets the Cougars right back in the game. I guess I never felt like the Ducks really were in that much trouble. I mean, if it takes that sort of goofiness to keep you in the game, I guess I always felt like Oregon probably was still, if not in command, sort of comfortably in control of that game, assuming the turnovers didn't continue. And they cleaned it up. They really played a strong third quarter, and then fourth quarter started emptying the bench, and then the final score tightens up.
It's almost a situation where I agree with you. I never felt, even when it got close there in the first half, that the overall outcome would be in doubt. But then you start to worry about style points. It's a late game. What are people going to do tomorrow morning when they wake up? They didn't watch the whole game. They're going to see this game that was way closer score-wise than it really was. Right. And, that's whatever. That's a good problem to have.
Ducks did lose a couple of first-place votes in the AP poll to East Coast voters, one in South Carolina, one in West Virginia. Maybe you had some people who watched the first half, went to bed. Both those voters switched their vote to Florida State, which did have an impressive victory over Clemson. So you could make the argument, even not considering kind of how things went for Oregon overall, that Florida State maybe is the best team in the country, at least this week. So, but the AP poll doesn't matter anymore because the BCS rankings are out now. Oregon behind Florida State in those as well. But every projection I've seen suggests that as long as the Ducks kind of keep handling their business on a week-to-week basis, that won't be an issue.
Marcus Mariota, who you mentioned, had the two turnovers. He still, I believe, had the highest QBR in the nation this past weekend. 57-yard touchdown run for Oregon's first score. And a lot of people, talk about his breakaway speed, but it was his move at the line. He sort of, was able to snake through a couple guys and then put a move on and then utilize his speed. It was one of his more impressive long touchdown runs, in my opinion.
He's such a sneaky runner because he's not one of these, D'Anthony Thomas looks like he's going fast. Those little feet are moving so quick. Marcus, he doesn't look like he's moving that fast even when he's at top speed, except in relation to everyone else on the field. And by the same token, his quickness at the line, he doesn't have the little choppy feet that make it look like he's putting on a lot of jukes, but he's elusive as well, as you saw in that run. I mean, it's just, if it wasn't his run weaving around the field at Washington, it was that one breaking away from Washington State. It's just really fun to be able to watch him perform right now, and you do gotta sort of treasure the moment now because you don't know what the future's going to hold for him.
Another guy that had a really big game for Oregon, it was great to see. Really not unusual that he had 100 yards rushing, but 192 yards rushing final for Byron Marshall on less than 20 carries. He had 3 touchdowns. He also had a big reception. Great play by Marcus where he rolls out and buys time and finds him down the sideline. But 4 straight games now with 100-plus rushing yards. D'Anthony Thomas hasn't played a regular snap, as you pointed out, since the Tennessee game, which was mid-September. Oregon's going to get him back. And then all of a sudden you've got this sort of polished veteran now in Byron Marshall that's been able to carry a lot of this load.
Yeah, and talking to Gary Campbell after the game, I mean, just the experience that Byron Marshall and also Thomas Tyner have been getting the last 4 games, I guess, without D'Anthony in the lineup is, it's just, you can't put a price tag on that from Oregon's perspective. The value of that going forward. I mean, D'Anthony Thomas, now you thought maybe he could be a guy you use in different ways, moving him around the formation with a Marshall or a Tyner in the backfield. But Marshall and Tyner needed to prove that they were capable of carrying the load to allow for that. Well, they've done that now because they've kind of been thrust into the fire, and you feel like you can trust them now going forward in November. And so that really just opens up just yet another facet offensively for Oregon.
Those two guys, Tyner and Marshall, have combined for 16 touchdowns.
Yeah.
Not too shabby. DeAnthony Thomas, even in basically 3 games, statistically he's played in 4 because he did play in the opening kickoff against Cal.
Right.
He has 6 touchdowns himself. So it's going to be a good problem for Scott Frost to have when he's able to get DeAnthony Thomas back in the lineup. Defensively, a big game for Tony Washington, a very odd offense to play against if you're the Oregon defense.
Yeah, I think coming off the Washington game where the Ducks did such a good job pressuring Keith Price, you knew Washington State was going to throw the ball a ton, and so hey, maybe here was a chance for the D-line to put more pressure on. But Connor Halliday gets rid of the ball so quick. I mean, it's just 3-step drop, boom, and the ball's out. They're not spreading the field and throwing deep. They're spreading the field and throwing underneath, and then trying to make big plays out of that. So really not a lot of time to get to the quarterback for the pass rushers, and yet still you saw moments where Tony Washington was able to generate some pressure, get some heat on, rush some throws, get Halliday having to move his feet, which that's always going to affect a quarterback's accuracy. And so they did what they could, and in Washington now, I mean, I think he's top 10, something like that in sacks nationally. I mean, he's a guy, when Deion Jordan graduated, for all the losses they suffered at the linebacker core, and Deion Jordan being the best of those guys, the number 3 pick in the draft last year, everyone within the team was like, no worries. Tony Washington is a guy they had faith in, even though maybe for fans he was as much of an unknown as a Derek Malone or Rodney Hardrick or anybody else. Those guys had a little bit more to prove internally. Tony Washington was something of a sure thing to the team, and now you're seeing why.
Also, Deion Jordan was dinged up a little bit at times last year. Tony Washington was able to at least get his feet wet, play some significant snaps. But he's really, he's carried that through to this year. And as you mentioned, he's one of the top sack leaders in the country. We took solicited a few Twitter questions before we taped today. Superset Greg would like to know about the backup quarterback situation. Oregon had the luxury really to be able to play all 3 of their primary quarterbacks in all but 1 game this year.
Right, yeah, and has Lockie appeared in every game?
Lockie has played in every game.
And Jake Rodriguez has gotten in all but 1. So, invaluable experience for those guys. They're not running the primary offense typically because they're just trying to run the clock out, which is, to get them that experience in those situations is invaluable. You create situations as much as you can in practice that are valuable too. I mean, there's been times in practice where the Ducks have been doing a clutch drill and the 2s are getting a chance, and the offense isn't able to score because a guy tries to spike the ball, but there's less than 3 seconds left on the clock, and you can't do that anymore. So there's a lesson that's learned in practice, that you don't have to learn in a game. In the game, the experience they're getting now, you're seeing crowd noise that they're dealing with, just different guys that they're having to work with, whether at receiver or offensive line that they have to communicate with. Again, all important lessons, and the fact that whether it's in practice or those late game situations, those guys are getting great experience, it's invaluable to them. In terms of going forward, everybody wants to know who Oregon's quarterback is going to be next year. You hope it's going to be Marcus Mariota, but he's going to have some opportunities.
Yeah.
And right now, Jeff Lockie, he's been the first guy off the bench consistently, and I think he's getting a lot more comfortable. Rodriguez has the stronger arm. He's the more dynamic runner for sure, but Lockie's another guy that's a sneaky runner, and the quality of Marcus Mariota's that Lockie has, not to suggest Jake doesn't, but I think Lockie has in spades, as Marcus does, he's not going to force a mistake. He's willing to throw the ball away. He's not going to commit turnovers, and I think that's something for Marcus is invaluable, and it is something that's to Jeff's credit right now too.
In the Washington State game, for most of the fourth quarter, those guys were able to switch off. Lockie, as you say, they're basically trying to kill the clock at that point.
Right.
But there was 1 third down play where they were looking to extend and get a first down. He made a nice move in the pocket, bought himself some time, completed a pass to Iele Ford.
Yeah.
You have to remember they're not playing with the 1s and oftentimes not even the 2s on the offensive line or in the skill position. So I think both of those guys have looked good. Certainly in practice we get to see them on a daily basis, and Marcus he's a once in a generation player at quarterback, and there's just no ignoring that.
Hoping one of these guys is going to be Marcus's folly It's not fair to them, and
Yeah.
it's not fair to you as a fan to expect that, because
Yeah.
you're going to be disappointed, probably. Marcus is just a transcendental player in terms of the program.
He has 19 touchdowns and no interceptions.
Transcendental, probably not the word I was looking for. Transcendent. His transcendentalism is something for philosophers to debate. But the other thing to consider, too, is how much the dynamic will change. Say Marcus does go. Spring for Jeff and Jake takes on an entirely different dynamic. Summer workouts take on an entirely different dynamic. And it's just a completely different situation for both those guys to be in than they're in now. And that could change the competition completely between the two in terms of how they react to that situation. So what you take from what you're seeing now, take that with a grain of salt, because things, when and if the time comes that Marcus leaves, it's going to change completely.
Another question via Twitter. This one, actually, Max and Braden both would like to know our thoughts on Cameron Hunt's performance in the game.
Talked to Steve Greatwood today, kind of how he graded out, kind of what you'd expect. There were some pass protection moments when he didn't quite do the right thing, and they'd like to have back, and some guys got some pressure on Marcus. I don't think it was a situation that led to a fumble in either case, but some pressure, but also some things to be encouraged by, and Cameron said kind of the same thing. It was great experience for him, and so he's happy for that. On the other hand, it was very humbling. It let him know what he's got to work on. Mm-hmm. But going forward, for him to have that experience is great. It seems to be the theme of this episode of Mac and Mose, is the value of the experience for some young guys. But Steve Greatwood couldn't remember the last time he started a true freshman on the offensive line. That speaks volumes. Lee Gundy, we think, was the last guy to do it for Oregon in '97. Greatwood wasn't on the staff at that point. It was during a period after he left and before he came back. So that kind of tells you, now, if James Usher, who was medically retired last month, if he'd been around, Hunt would probably be redshirting, and that probably would have been Usher. But, kind of things fell into place. They needed a true freshman to step up, and I think for the most part he did.
One of the other questions we got, this one was from Rob. Come on, Rob. WSU D-line was able to put some pressure, get some pressure on the quarterback. Any lingering concern?
And that may go back to what we were just talking about. You're starting a true freshman, and for as well as he played, he said there were some communication things he wants to clean up, technical things he wants to clean up. Montague was kind of in and out a couple different times, so Everett Benyard was playing guard for him. So now, when Greg's out, Jake Fisher didn't play in the game. Now you're about 2 of your 5 regular starters, and the 5 up front have played a lot of football together so far this season. So you got to think the cohesion's really particularly there for that group, and so you're going to expect some slippage when they're gone. Any lingering questions? I don't know about that, but this front 7 UCLA is bringing in next week is a really, really good group, and so that might do a better job of reinforcing, hey, was the Washington State game an anomaly, or are there some issues? On the other hand, UCLA might just be so good that it didn't matter how good your front 7 is, or your front 5 is. Maybe Oregon gets Jake back, Montague is fine, the top 5 goes start to finish next week, and UCLA still gets some pressure on them because they're that good.
Well, we will talk more about that UCLA game later in the week. That is a 4 o'clock kickoff. It'll be on ESPN College Gameday in town also this week, and we will have a location for you in our next segment of Mac and Mose.
You'll be up early for that?
Yeah, I'm usually up. I'm just on my couch, with some coffee, and maybe I might DVR it so I don't get up till about 6:45, and
sounds about right to me.
Commercials. So we'll talk about that. Again, the final score from this last game as Oregon moves to 7-0, 4-0 in the Pac-12 Conference, 62-38 over Washington State. The Ducks are now number 3 in the initial BCS rankings. They're number 2 in both of the, all 3 of the human polls, the AP, the USA Today coaches, and the Harris poll. Till next time, we'll see you.